Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start as a subcommittee and bills and sign-in order. And I think, excuse me, Assemblymember Carter signing in first, followed by Assemblymember Amiano. So, Ms. Carter, would you come forward? AB 217. Okay, so we're gonna establish a quorum first, Ms. Carter. If you have patience with us, can we call the roll?
Swanson.
Present.
Morell.
Present.
Alejo. Present. Allen. Furutani. Gurel. Yamada.
Okay, and the committee will adopt the committee rules. Okay, without objection, the rules are adopted. Okay, Ms. Carter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Assembly Bill 217 would prohibit smoking inside long-term health care facilities. I now have accepted committee staff amendments to allow outside patient smoking areas as specified. Since 2006, the Surgeon General's summary has reported that, quote, there is no safe level of exposure to tobacco smoke. One lit cigarette in a long-term care facility exposes non-smoking workers, non-facility workers, non-smoking patients, and those who visit long-term care facilities to over 7,000 harmful chemicals, of which over 70 of these chemicals cause cancer. In the December 2010, outside a Northern California long-term health care facility, a 67-year-old man died from burns he suffered when he was smoking a cigarette, which he dropped on his gown, which ignited into flames. Smoking, combined with oxygen tanks, flammable chemicals, and other combustible items found in long-term health care facilities, does not make for a healthy or a safe environment. I have with me today Dr. Janine Cataldo, Assistant Professor at the University of California, San Francisco, Department of Physiology Nursing, who will speak in support of the bill. And I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. So witness in support?
Hi. I'm not testifying in support or opposition of Assembly Bill 217, and UCSF doesn't take a position. But I am here to offer my expertise from over 20 years of clinical and research experience with older smokers. My research has shown that the tobacco industry has had a very strong voice and has impacted on the policy that affects older smokers. So I'm very grateful to be invited here today to testify. There are 2 points I want to emphasize. One is that no matter what the age or the health status of the older smoker, smoking cigarettes continues to damage their health and their ability to stay independent. The physical consequences are well known, but there's also psychological and social consequences. Older smokers are found to be much more depressed than non-smokers, and they're found to have a significantly more diminished quality of life than non-smokers. We have built a body of evidence that shows that smoking cessation brings with it an increased quality of life. Smokers do not enjoy smoking. They are addicted to nicotine. What is called joy, we have found, is actually the relief from the physical and psychological demands of nicotine. Given the impact of smoking on the health and lives of older adults, it is malpractice to let a smoker continue to smoke and go untreated from nicotine addiction. The Joint Commission has adopted this rationale for hospitals. Why not for long-term care facilities? My second point is that, yes, it is the right of residents to exercise their autonomy about what is important to them. And as a geriatric nurse, I'm behind that. But what about the rights of the non-smokers, patients, families, and care providers? Smoke does not stay behind doors or windows. It doesn't stay outside the exit or behind the curtains. It penetrates the environment. It's in the air and it's on all the surfaces. Science shows that it harms all those who come in contact with it, if they mean to come in contact with it or not. Laws have protected workers, patients, and citizens' rights in all public places. Why not in long-term care facilities? Thank you for letting me have my voice.
Thank you very much. Witness in support? Any other witness in support? Public, any witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, has the bill been properly moved? Is there, and properly seconded? Any questions by members of the committee? I think it's a good bill. We all have had members in our family that have passed as a result of smoking, and sometimes contact smoke. So I think the bill should move forward. Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually did have a question and a comment. When I was on the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, we addressed this issue with respect to a new facility that was coming into our county, not a long-term care facility, but just one of our own Yolo County health and mental health buildings. And the issue of the dependency, I think that you mentioned earlier in your testimony on especially older adults and perhaps those that may be suffering from some degree of mild cognitive impairment or dementia and otherwise. I just wondered to require cessation of smoking, which I do support. I will be supporting the bill, but without discussing potentially what treatment opportunities would be made available to those who are addicted. Was there any conversation during the course of the development of the bill as to what treatment might be available to some of these individuals who are essentially going to be now on the course of having to stop smoking?
That particular issue didn't come up because the patient still can go outside and smoke, so the health issue portion of it was not part of this bill.
Okay. So within certain boundaries, they can still.
You may have had.
If they're diagnosed with nicotine addiction, they can get treated for it if they want to.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions. Pardon? Oh, Mr. Lev? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't.
I wanted to thank Assemblymember Carter for bringing this bill forward and also to listen to concerns of the other side, but really finding that middle ground by limiting areas on the outside that would protect, the rights of the employees there, but allow that limited area for that to still take place somewhere on site, but much better plan and a good middle ground on that issue. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Carter, I don't see any other questions. Would you care to close?
Yes, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay, please poll the members.
Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morell. No. Morell, no. Alejo. Aye. Alejo, aye. Allen. Furtani. Gurel. Yamada. Yamada, aye. Bill's on call.
Okay, bill's on call, and as other members come, we'll let them vote.
Thank you. Thank you so much, members.
Okay, H.R. 11, Mr. Damiano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to present House Resolution 11. In California, there are around 200,000 domestic workers who serve as housekeepers, nannies, and caregivers in private homes. And according to estimates from the International Labor Organization, there are 100 million persons, predominantly women, who labor as domestic workers around the world. And in the U.S., domestic work is among the top 20 occupations for women. Domestic workers play a critical role in our global economy, working to ensure the health and prosperity of families and enabling others to participate in the workforce. However, despite the importance of their work, domestic workers have historically been and still are economically and socially marginalized. House Resolution 11 simply seeks to join numerous other countries around the world in recognizing International Domestic Worker Day. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay, the bill's been properly moved by Mr. Leo, seconded by Ms. Yamada.
Mr. Chair and members, Caitlin Vega here for the California Labor Federation, here in support. We think this is important because oftentimes domestic work is not even really acknowledged as work. It's work that often goes on in the home. It's work that is traditionally done by women. It's work that is very low paid and undervalued. So we commend the role that Mr. Amiano has taken in really being a champion on behalf of domestic workers, and we are here in support of this resolution.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members, Mark Schock, California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, also here in its support.
Thank you.
Joseph Vigela with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles, also strong support, and we applaud the author for introducing this resolution.
Thank you very much. In support?
No position.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Jordan Lindsay with the California Association for Health Services at Home, representing home care providers, home health providers, hospice, and an array of other service providers in the home throughout California. The underground economy is huge and rampant in home care in California, and widely suspected that abuse occurs in those situations, both towards the worker and towards the consumer. For those reasons, we do believe that there are many improvements to be made in this situation. We also believe that legitimate home care companies that employ the workers are a solution to many of those issues that exist currently. And for those reasons, we have been working on this situation for many, many years to help improve that underground situation throughout California. Thank you.
Yes, in support?
Elena Perez with the California National Organization for Women in support of the bill.
Okay. Any other statements in support? In opposition to the bill? Okay. Seeing none, questions by members? Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Mike Morrell. I have a question here. I noticed that we already have a Domestic Worker Appreciation Day, and so are we duplicating our services, asking for an International Domestic Workers Day?
No,
what's the distinction?
This is an amplification of that. This is more of a worldwide recognition of the situation that we would be endorsing, as opposed to just specifically here.
Okay. Any other questions, Ms. Yamada?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Amiano, I just wanted to note in the analysis that with the many millions, 78 million baby boomers coming online, this is particularly important, and we know that caregivers are coming to us from throughout the world. So I appreciate, and today is March 30th. So it's a very auspicious day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I thank the author for the bill. This is a population of workers that are underrepresented without the kind of rights that other workers have, and so I thank you very much for highlighting that. I would ask, would you like to close?
Yes, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much. Please poll the members.
Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morrell.
Oppose?
Morrell.
No.
No.
Yeah.
Alejo. Aye. Alejo, aye. Allen.
Aye.
Allen, aye. Furutani. Furutani, aye. Gurel. Yamada. Aye. Yamada, aye. It is adopted.
Okay. We have enough votes to move it out. We're going to leave the roll open for other members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
Mr. Alejo.
So, Mr. Leo, you have two bills, AB 10 and AB 243.
We'll start with the easiest one, AB 10.
AB 10? I thought they both were easy. Was it?
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. To start out, I just wanted to point out that the average price for a gallon of gasoline is $4 per gallon, as we all know. So a farm worker, a Walmart worker, a restaurant worker, or a domestic worker, people earning the minimum wage can buy 2 gallons of gasoline for every hour they work. And after working a full 8-hour day, they can't buy a tank of gas just to get back and forth for work for that week. It's projected that gas prices will continue to rise another 13% this year. And that's not the only thing rising. The cost of wheat is up 67% this year. The price of corn is up 60% this year. And when grain prices go up, so does the cost of livestock that feed on it. Economists predict a 6% increase in the cost of food this year. So for the average household, That's about $328 per family more than they would have spent last year. That's a week of take-home pay for a minimum wage worker just to keep up with that increase. The price of cotton is also increasing, a projected 150% increase over last year, and economists predict that that will result in a 10% increase in the cost of clothing. For the average household, that's about $139 more per family than they would have spent last year. AB 10 is about equity, and it's about economic justice. It is about ensuring that workers can maintain their purchasing power year after year. For 3 years, workers have struggled to get by in light of these rising prices, some very dramatically, and while their real wages declined 2.9%. The fact of the matter is that raising the minimum wage will help our economy by generating more consumer spending. When minimum wage workers have more to spend, they'll spend it. They cannot afford to save it. And according to a new study authored by economic professors at the University of California at Berkeley, the University of Massachusetts, and the University of North Carolina, raising the minimum wage does not eliminate low-paying jobs in either the short or the long term. I have here with me today Dr. Sylvia Alegreto, Deputy Chair of the Center of Wage and Employment Dynamics at the Institute of Research on Labor and Employment at UC Berkeley, to further speak on this point and to testify in support of raising the minimum wage in California. And I'll pass the mic to Dr. Alegreto.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. The minimum wage has been one of the most studied and debated topics in economics. And of course, one of the most important questions has been what he has just posed, that the Assembly member just posed, is that does increasing the minimum wage cause employment loss for affected groups such as teenagers or affected industries such as the restaurant industry? The literature goes back decades, and there was a consensus at one point that showed that there probably were small disemployment effects, meaning an increase in the minimum wage did decrease employment for these in affected groups. However, a new and growing body of cutting-edge research on minimum wage builds upon and expands the theory and methods that measure such effects. Much of this research, including my own with Drs. Dubé and Reich that you just mentioned, published this month in a peer-reviewed top economics journal, first illustrates how and explains why the old consensus estimates were incorrect. In sum, the employment trends and patterns across the country and over time are correlated with the patterns of minimum wage changes, especially over time and in different states. Thus, we were able to show why their estimates were attained spuriously, because the minimum wage is correlated with these trends but has not caused these trends. So when we build upon the methods to better account for these spatial trends and varying changes of minimum wages and employment, we conclude our estimates show that increases in minimum wage do not cause employment declines. And there is a fairly complex economic theory called monopsony that explains why this is, which I don't think we have to go into today, and we certainly could if we want to. But it makes economic sense. The old supply and demand probably isn't what's working here. But moreover, there are many positive effects of the minimum wage that are obviously not talked about. A strong minimum wage matters. We show strong wage effects, so it does matter for workers and their families. We show reduced turnover and quit rates, thus reduces high cost of turnovers that the firms face, better worker morale and productivity. Two last points. The proposed increase is really not an increase at all, which is what you're seeing in the graphs that I'm sending you. In the figures that you're being showed. It hasn't increased in 4 years, thus the proposal basically will just keep the minimum wage rate at the rate it was 4 years ago. This is why the importance of indexing or annualizing, adjusting the wage is so important. Finally, the timing could not be better for our economy, given that essentially this economy is stuck in neutral, an unemployment rate that has been in double digits for over 2 years now, over 12% 1.5 of those years, and expected to remain high into the foreseeable future. The economy suffers from lack of demand. These increased funds to low-wage workers will be spent and will help to stimulate the economy. This is based on research from the Federal Reserve of Chicago. So an increase in California's minimum wage will not cost jobs. It will help families of minimum wage workers make ends meet, will strengthen the economy by providing a crucial stimulus precisely when the economy needs it most. The bottom line is that the economic crisis, the economic case for the wage increase at this time is more than compelling. Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, we got one more witness here to testify in support. I have with me Mr. Marcus Marquez, a small business owner of a local restaurant, to provide his input as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Marcus Marquez. My wife and I own a restaurant here in Midtown Sacramento. We opened the restaurant in 2007, and for the last 4 years, we have been supporting local farmers and local purveyors to support the community. My wife and I each work more than 40 hours per week, but to us, it's worth it. This is our dream. I'm here today to support raising the minimum wage as a small business owner. It's not the labor cost that I struggle with, it's the regulations and profitability. Customer service is more important to me. I know that to run a successful business, I need quality, successful staff. I'm a boss that demands excellence from each and every employee. Our restaurant, we offer health insurance, including dental and vision for anybody that works with us, from the dishwashers to our chef. We are able to do this because we created and implemented this in our business plan from when we started back in 2007. And providing health insurance to ensure that we hire the best employees is very important to us. I believe that a minimum cost of living increase is fair to my employees and will help our community. I know that when most of my employees have more money in their pocket, they spend it. They may not spend it at my restaurant, but they spend it in our community. And at the end of the day, spending money is good for my business. And for my employees who live and work near and around my business, I know the money goes back right into the community. I ask for your support today because we need an economic stimulus that works. I ask that you support putting more money back in the employees' pockets so it can be returned to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And other witnesses in support, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, real quick, like for the gentleman who's walking away who owns a restaurant,
Sir?
Yeah, you don't need a law to give your people more than $8 an hour, just in case if you didn't know that. I thought I'd point that out.
I'm sorry?
You can give your people as much money as you want right now. You don't need a lot of, okay, you knew that.
Yes.
Okay, to the young lady here, what was your name, ma'am?
Dr. Sylvia Alegredo.
Sylvia, you had cited there's a lot of evidence that minimum wage is good. Can you give me a couple, 2 or 3 of those reports so I can write them down?
You want me to just, they're long, I can send them to you, but there's
Well,
my report that was just published in the Industrial Relations.
Your report?
Yeah.
Do you have any other reports, just 2 you can cite?
Yes,
right
and another report by Dubé, Lester, and Reich. And there's another one by the Center for Economic and Policy Research out of Washington, D.C. by John Schmidt. There's quite a few at this point.
Okay, because here's the thing, and I don't know if this is, I'm new to this political thing here, but being an
we can let you talk as long as you're nice.
As long as I'm nice. So any rookie years,
That's
let me
all
know.
right. I'm used to it.
Couple of things that I'm concerned about. You know, on not today, on January 4th, 2011, the Wall Street Journal interviewed some governors from various parts of America. And what is concerning to me in a time where our state is vulnerable, they were quoted as saying their economic recovery strategy for their states is to come to California and raid California of our jobs. Florida being one, Ohio being another. Even Governor Rick Perry from Texas jokes that he spends more time in California recruiting our companies away. 2 reasons they do that. Number 1, costly regulation. Number 2, a lot of taxes and that kind of thing. So I just am very concerned that by raising this minimum wage, these guys are circling the boat right now, smelling blood, which is driving businesses away, which is shrinking our economic base, shrinking our revenues. This just seems like another stick in the eye of businesses, to be quite frank with you. And your studies, for a man who's been in business, all my adult life, that is just hard for me to accept that fact, just in view of the statistics of people that are actually vacating our state at a very rapid rate.
Yeah, the one biggest point that I can address is that most of these jobs aren't jobs that can vacate the state. I mean, if you're a restaurant here in California and you're in San Francisco, you've got location, location, location. You're not going to go to, small town Iowa. The fact is that most of these jobs are service industry jobs or restaurant industry jobs or what have you, and they are not going to move anywhere. And the fact is, and I can't stress this enough, which is this chart that you have, if you see this is the California minimum wage is in red. It really hasn't raised at all. I mean, this is over a long period of time. It's actually lower today than it was in 1970. So the fact is, we're only keeping up the wage floor to what it was a few years ago. It hasn't changed in 4 years. In a time when, first of all, we have record-breaking inequality and a wealth divide that we haven't seen since the 1920s, the fact is the low-wage labor market, the bottom has fallen out of the low-wage labor market. And these wages are not even up to what we would assume that the worker productivity is. It's below the competitive wage, which is why you don't see the negative disemployment effects that you might see in a competitive model. If you went to $25, of course, we would probably see some negative effects. But the fact is, we have wage-setting firms such as Walmart, the biggest single employer in the country, and they're setting these wages very low. And the fact is, we have very high unemployment. So people, I mean, if you want to set it at $3, people would be working for $3. Okay. But the fact is,
we have to wrap it up.
Yeah, your point is just not true. These are not firms that can move.
And I also wanted to add, though, just, there's other states, 6 other states in the District of Columbia that have higher minimum wages, including our neighbors, state of Nevada, state of Oregon, state of Washington, Illinois, Vermont, Connecticut. They all have higher minimum wages than we do. Okay. And we haven't seen that evidence of jobs being lost. But I think that's what's important, is that these studies are being done, presenting with evidence and data that it hasn't caused these concerns. As we all know it, and it makes sense that these workers who are barely getting by are going to put that money back into the economy. They're going to spend it locally in the restaurants or grocery stores, the retail shops. That money is going to be regenerated into the economy. And we all know, I think there's no question that any adult can't even live off $8 an hour this day with the increasing prices, much less trying to provide for their families.
Yeah, so, all right, we're gonna hear from the supports, and I'll give you another chance, Mr. Morrell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Order, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like that going forward, rather, if we have questions or if we have comments, I don't want to get into running debates because we could be here for hours, and I recognize the passion, but I'd like to stay away from a running.
Okay. All right. No problem. We'll tighten it up as we move along. Yes. and support.
Members, Mark Schock, California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. Very briefly, the usual way that California increases its minimum wage is by the Industrial Welfare Commission, which has been defunded for the last 3 to 4 years. It's not refunded in the governor's budget for 2011-2012. If it were to be refunded in 2012 and 2013, and a wage board process initiated, it would be approximately 2 years from that time before the adequacy of the minimum wage would be determined and an increase possibly voted on. So that would be about 6 years since the last minimum wage increase. This is a really modest increase up front, and what it does is protects business down the road from a big surprise of a huge increase because you've gone for 6 years without any increase.
All right, thank you. We're gonna ask witnesses to give their name and organization and whether they're in support or not.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lee Sandal on behalf of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, in support.
Thank you very much. In support.
Elena Perez with the California National Organization for Women, in support.
Thank you very much.
Deanna Furman on behalf of the California Nurses Association, also in support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, in support.
Thank you.
Mariko Yoshihara with the California Employment Lawyers Association, in support.
Okay, thank you.
Jovan A.G. representing United Domestic Workers AFSCME, also in support.
Thank you.
Randy Cheek with SEIU Local 1000, in strong support.
Mike Carroll, Western Center on Law and Poverty, and the California Applicant Attorneys Association, both in support.
Great, thank you.
Marcy Berman on behalf of the California Teamsters Public Affairs Council, Unite Here, United Food and Commercial Workers, California Conference Board of the Amalgamated Transit Workers Union, and the California Conference of Machinists. Wholehearted support.
Thank you very much.
I'm Davi Rodriguez from Save Our State. We don't either oppose or support the bill. We just want to point out that there is a somewhere between 58,000 and 100,000 day laborers that don't have any of these laws affect them, and the people that have to compete against the people that hire them don't appreciate you not taking that into consideration. We can raise the minimum wage, and it'll only affect people who play above board.
Okay.
We don't have anybody addressing the illegal day laborers that are dominating some of the lower echelons of the common person's enterprises. I wish you'd consider that for a change, and remember that every time you raise the minimum wage, it only hurts the people who are playing above board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. In support of the bill?
I'm sorry?
No. Next speaker in support.
Beth McGovern on behalf of the California Commission on the Status of Women in strong support.
Yes. And Vice Chair Morrell, you can speak from your chair.
I'd like to speak from here because I want to make sure I just make a statement here. As a citizen, a business owner for all my life, practically, a realtor, a finance company, and a property manager, and not a union person, I oppose this bill. I think free enterprise should stick in the business owners. They should determine this issue, not government. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. In opposition, and you can take a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Matt Sutton. I'm with the California Restaurant Association.
Yes.
I guess what I'd like to do is do a brief introduction and then turn it over to a CRA member here, because I know you're interested in keeping the dialogue to 2 and 2 at best.
But I mean, you have time. I mean, your opposition, so you should
appreciate that.
Take your time.
Thank you. For the Restaurant Association and the restaurant industry at large, it's not really a matter of whether you want to pay an employee more, but it's can you. It's basic economics. We're in the midst of an unprecedented economic downturn. It's a nightmare of an economy. Restaurant owners up and down the state have been incurring massive amounts of debt over the last few years just to keep open. They'd like to start chipping away at that, and they'd like to start getting back in the black. The vast majority of the economic studies that we've seen have concluded basically that a minimum wage increase in down economy has a negative employment impact. The last state study we're aware of was done by the California Industrial Relations Research Report, and it looked at the impact of the 2001 minimum wage increase, and basic conclusion was to raise the minimum wage in a bad economy only exacerbates the unemployment rate and the job loss. It may be true that restaurants can't pick up and leave, or they won't choose to like other companies can, but the bottom line is it's a cost pressure, and it gets to the point where you have to relieve people of their hours. You may not fire them, you may relieve their hours. So that, we think, has a bigger negative impact on the employees. The last thing I'd say is you'll hear this reality expressed from restaurateurs up and down the state, whether it was the restaurateur on the local news here last night, or even restaurant owners in the Assembly Members District. A City Council member, Victor Gomez, is a restaurant owner. He's expressed some of the same concerns, and I have Rocco Bialy here to give you an idea of what it's like on the ground when a minimum wage increase occurs.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, my name is, I wasn't angry when I got here, but now I am. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak today with regard to Assembly Bill 10. My name is Rocco Bialy, and I've owned and operated Rocco's Ristorante and Pizzeria in Walnut Creek, California for the last 12 years. Increasing the minimum wage can appear to be popular because it has the appearance of helping the poor, but in reality, raising the minimum wage does far more damage than good. With unemployment levels at an all-time high across the United States, and especially here in California, raising the minimum wage only decreases the chances of employers doing more hiring and expanding their businesses. Why? Because it's a direct hit on their bottom line profit margins, which are oftentimes wafer thin, especially in the restaurant business. It isn't just the 50 cents an hour that the employer has to contend with. It's also the added payroll tax implications that add another 12 to 18% to that 50-cent increase. California's minimum wage is already 10.50% higher than the U.S. federal mandated minimum wage. Isn't that enough? I'm winging this one here. I get really angry when I hear people say you can't support a family on the minimum wage. I don't know why that's even in the narrative. The minimum wage is designed for entry-level workers entering the workforce. The wage is not designed nor intended to be to support a family. I hire lots of minimum wage employees. I start them off at $8 an hour. If they prove their worth, they get a raise the old-fashioned way. They earn it, not by some government mandate. I've done the math on just what this proposed wage increase will cost my business. And by the way, I know I speak for thousands of business owners in California. Using my restaurant as an example, this 6.3 wage increase will cost me about $16,000 to $20,000 per year, or about $1,500 per month, not including the increase on the payroll tax. I just cannot absorb these increased costs without raising menu prices. If I raise menu prices, I don't stay competitive. If I don't stay competitive, I go out of business. If I go out of business, 45 people go on unemployment. So, raising the minimum wage leads directly to more and or increased unemployment. In the restaurant business, which hires and employs thousands of workers, this is the worst possible time to raise labor costs. Our operating costs are literally skyrocketing. Our vendors are adding huge fuel charges to every delivery. We, in our Italian Pizza Pasta restaurant, have seen a 50% increase in the price of cheese. Doesn't sound like much, but it's huge. Just in the last 9 months. Not to mention major increases in beer, wine, meat, and paper goods, and especially produce, where produce prices have skyrocketed. Add on the highest workers' compensation premiums in the country, looming healthcare insurance mandates, rising energy costs, and outrageous credit card processing fees, and you have a recipe for disaster, no pun intended. This is a non-sustainable business model. It doesn't take an economist to figure out why. Do you ever look around and see all the restaurant vacancies? There's a reason. Namely, restaurants are very labor intensive. While on the subject of restaurants, if this committee decides to move forward with an increase to the minimum wage, I would strongly urge you to consider adding the tip credit to the narrative. The U.S. Fair Labor Standards Act allows for the implementation of the tip credit. The IRS and the federal government both recognize this, but California is one of 4 states in the union to not exercise this right to help offset labor costs for its small businesses. The tip credit seems to work okay in 46 other states. Why not California? In theory and in practice, there is no need to raise the minimum wage, as mentioned. It's an entry-level wage. Workers who perform will see an increase in their wage, the old-fashioned way. They will have earned it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Witness in opposition.
Oh, thank you. My name is Ruth Lopez Novador, and Mr. Chairman, it's a pleasure to be here. Not really a pleasure, but thank you for allowing me. And I am the CEO of Beverly Oncology and Imaging Centers in Montebello. We have been in business for 30 years. It's a family business. Even though we're not a not-for-profit, we're a community center. We offer free breast screening for women because BCEDP, as you know, was cut off in the first 6 months of the year. And so we offered free breast screening. And I want to tell you, the last one we had was wall-to-wall women. They are each interviewed individually, and each one had to give us why they were a hardship to receive a free breast scan. Invariably, particularly in the Latino community and other minority communities, the husband is not employed or they are not employed. This is a very challenging piece of legislation for me to understand at this time. I exist in a TEA community, target employee area, target enterprise area, meaning that our unemployment far surpasses the rest of the country. It exceeds 17%. I cannot fathom an increase in the minimum wage right now in my community because it will discriminate against the high school graduates, against the minorities, because those are the people that get cut first. Minorities, low-income people are disproportionately employed by small business. Period. So if you impose this on the small businesses that are already suffering, by the way, I'm in healthcare and I'm supposed to be doing well, wrong. We've had the fastest down spiral in revenues. In 18 months, we've downsized our company 30%. I had 75 employees 18 months ago. I have 50 now, and every single one takes a furlough every pay period. I do not have a personal assistant and I've decreased my salary in half. The doctor doesn't take a salary. He does other things to get a salary. We're not in a community that can handle an additional increase. I find it baffles me that this would come up at this time, and I duly respect our researcher and our professor, but I want to know if that study included two other things. How does it impact productivity? When I lay off an employee, I have less staff to get the job done. Productivity is what impacts our GDP. The other piece I want to know if she has addressed is, I love the comment that was made that they're not going anywhere, so let's penalize them more. That's not what you said, I understand. That's not what you said, but this is the reality because this is how we get penalized. You may not realize it. 10 years ago, I used to go to the training panel and beat the drum and ask them why they were giving training money to corporate America and labor unions, which is fine, because it's the small businesses that train entry-level jobs. And we never get government money to help us. I had a home health agency where I took the Spanish language nurses into my home health agency. Within a year, they were getting sign-on bonuses at hospitals. Now, we know that's an exception in other industries, but the point here is that I hire staff from my community with distinct competitive advantages, but they're not desirable to corporate America until I've had them in my company for a year. And we get no financing for that, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to see the training panel issue reviewed.
Okay.
All right? Okay. Let me get back to this.
Okay.
We train our entry-level people. I was born and raised in East Los Angeles, so these are my people. By raising this wage, you are minimizing the amount of people that will get trained and transition to another corporation. I want to finish the thought that she brought up about that we're stuck here. It's true. My mom lives here. My aunt lives here. I am not going out of California, and if you raise the minimum wage, I'm not going. But I will tell you who's going. Corporate America is going, and they're taking the job to Asia. You're right. We're not going anywhere, but corporations are leaving and taking the jobs to Asia. All right.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
You're going to have to wrap up.
I have to wrap up?
No, you're done. Thank you.
Okay. He's in charge of
and
this
witnesses in opposition. Just a name and organization, please.
Cynthia Leon with the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, also in opposition because of the impact it will have on our small manufacturers and the overall supplier network.
Thank you very much.
Jennifer Barrera from the California Chamber of Commerce, and we're also in opposition given the timing of it. It's a horrible time to be raising a minimum wage when we have such a high unemployment rate.
Thank you very much.
Crystal Jack on behalf of California Citrus Mutual, Western Agricultural Processors Association, California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, Western Pistachio Association, and the California Grape and Tree Fruit League, all in opposition.
Okay.
Tricia Geringer with Agricultural Council of California, representing farmer-owned businesses and cooperatives from all over the state, also in opposition for the reasons previously stated.
Thank you.
John Hanley, California Independent Grocers Association, in opposition.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Chairman, Park Terry on behalf of the California Landscape Contractors Association. Just want to mention that in 2006 we were one of the few employer organizations that actually supported an increase in the minimum wage. Back then the unemployment rate was 4.9%. Today it's 12.2%, and for that reason alone we are in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. State.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation, in opposition.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Dave Pulio, Western Growers Association, in opposition.
Thank
you. Guadalupe Sandoval, California Farm Labor Contractor Association, in opposition in today's economy.
Thank you.
John Robinson with the California Attractions and Parks Association, theme water and amusement parks in the state. We're in opposition.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Kara Bush with the California Grocers Association. We're in opposition for all the reasons previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions by the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Lay, would you like to?
I just wanted our
no, we're gonna move forward. Okay,
very
thank
good.
you, Doc.
Well,
appreciate it.
Me. I don't get to respond.
No, thank you.
2 seconds.
Thank you.
Well, members,
you wanted to close for you?
I'll can we split our time?
Nope.
Okay.
Close for you?
Well, let me touch on some quick points. One, regarding when we pay our workers more, we're going to be able to retain them. So, and that's been a big problem with employee turnover. And a majority of the people earning the minimum wage are adults, sometimes having to work 2 or 3 minimum wage paying jobs to provide for their families. Majority of those workers are being Latino, majority of those workers being women as well. And every time that this state has brought up the issue of raising the minimum wage, it's for the opponents, it's never the right time. That's always been said. Every time this bill has come up before the state legislature, it's the common phrase raised. And so the question is, well, when is the right time? What does the right economy look like then? If every time that it's been up, it's always said it's never the right time. But members, this is a critical time for the workers, the lowest paid workers in California. It's been 3 years since the last time the minimum wage was raised. Next year will be 4 years. The purchasing power of minimum wage workers declines on an annual basis with the cost of goods and services rising every year. It's let's not forget that the first federal minimum wage was enacted during the Great Depression, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, during one of the most difficult times in the history of our country. We enacted this as a package of legislation to get our country out of the toughest of times. On January 1st of this year, the minimum wage, as I said earlier, was raised in 6 states and the District of Columbia, but our state, unfortunately, wasn't one of them. Let's fix that and give hardworking Californians the raise they deserve. Let's give them that ability to pay their most basic living expenses and provide for their own families. Let's be able to do that now, and I ask for an aye vote today.
Okay, thank you very much. I did have one question before we move on, and then we'll entertain a motion, and that is, was there any study information that showed after the last minimum wage raise in California that showed negative impacts on assortment of businesses that you're familiar with, Doctor?
No, there hasn't been.
Okay.
Not for California.
Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. Ms. Shimada, first of all, we entertain a motion to...
I'll move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
This has been moved. Is there a second? Okay, the motion is moved and seconded. Comments, Ms. Morrell?
When you were asked that question, there has been no studies. There's none to your mind, or you're 100% sure there was no studies?
Not for the study that I know most recently was just put out about California was the living wage. It was just put out last week, looking at the living wage in San Francisco and seeing if there were any disappointing effects, and there wasn't.
But a minute ago you were asked a question.
But for California, I don't believe there has been specifically just on California, but that's maybe I don't know if they were.
And
maybe I'm not aware.
The bill will move through, and if there are reports, we would appreciate anyone that want to provide them for us. Any other discussion? Yes.
You know, I certainly respect the folks who came here today in opposition, and I heard their passion. But I will tell you that a little bit of history here. When the minimum wage was enacted in the 1960s, it was enacted as a living wage. If the living wage would have been indexed to inflation starting in the 1960s, it would be $18 an hour. If it factored in productivity increases, it would be $22 to $23 an hour. When people are laid off in a bad economy, the productivity of the remaining workers is higher, and they're not capturing that productivity. To me, I think that there's folks up here on the dais who would support and work toward the regulations that bedevil people. But when you talk to workers who are not entry-level workers, who are working 2 jobs, 8 hours a day, 2 jobs, that's 16 hours, and they can't afford rent and the gasoline to get to work, something has to be done. Right now, you know, someone talked about the jobs going to Asia. They're going to Ireland, they're going to Europe, they're going everywhere where the corporate tax rate is lower than in this country. Right now, corporate America is asking for a tax holiday so they can repatriate $2.1 trillion of profit over the last few years. In early committee meetings I've been at today, there was an opportunity to cap people who were making $150,000 to cap their wages so that they would take a wage freeze during the next couple of years. My Republican colleagues would not support that kind of capping of people who are making that kind of money. I would submit to you that if you believe that America is a consumer society, how are they going to buy the cheese? How are they going to buy the pizza? How are they going to be able to buy the cars? Even Henry Ford understood that you had to pay your workers enough to buy the cars. So if we're going to have a consumer society, we need to find a way to allow people to be able to live. If we went to a free market, like it's always suggested, we probably would have people working for $3 or $4 an hour because there seems to be no limit to the desire to increase profits. So to my way of thinking, we need to work together where we can and agree regarding regulation, other ways to help business. But regarding the minimum wage, I'm passionate about this issue. We just took $12 billion in cuts that's affecting the working poor and the unemployed. We've got to help people who are not making it. So in all sincerity, we have a difference of opinion here, but I strongly support this bill, and thank you for bringing it here.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Allen. And all we're doing now is taking comments from members. Mr. Morrell, no more witnesses.
No more. We have one
member has closed. Member has closed, and
they actually did have a study,
and they can send it to the committee, and the bill will go forward. And if they want to add it to the record, they can do that. Okay. Any other statements by members? The bill's been moved and seconded. Let me just say that I appreciated the testimony today very much. We allowed certain flexibility since this was our first hearing, and with some members also that weren't quite familiar with all the rules. That was fine, no problem. But don't expect that's going to be the case as we go forward. And so I appreciated the passion. I think that it's really important for us to understand, if we haven't understood from this last recession, from our current recession, that we're all in this together, then we missed the whole point. We are all in this together, and as the cost of doing business will vary according to all the circumstances. That's true. But I think that the minimum wage represents a floor, an important floor, and those employees are also consumers, and they keep the economy rolling. So from that, I would call for the vote, and I recommend I vote. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up, Mr. You hadn't spoken yet.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate the discussion around this very important issue. I was planning not to vote on it today. I think the economy is in a very fragile state. I know that we need a certain number of votes to get this out so we can get it to the floor where we can have a real true discussion and have a final vote, so I'll be supporting it. But I am very concerned about what's being raised in terms of the timing. I appreciate the studies and all the academics. That's great. I think what's happening a lot, and it was mentioned by another speaker, the underground economy is driving so much these days for low-wage earners. It's not the organizations that are paying the minimum wage, it's those that are working in the part of our economy that is growing by leaps and bounds in so many different areas. People are just being paid off the books, and that's how they're dealing with this issue. So I don't find this as any real solution to anything in terms of improving people's lives to the point where things are going to be greatly better. I understand the spirit of it, and I appreciate it and support it. So whenever I look at issues, I look at the issue of content first. What's the principle that's driving it? Those things I agree with in principle. But then I look at the context. And I think our economy is very fragile at the moment. This is going to be a very difficult vote, a very difficult time to do this. I'm going to vote in support to move it out of the committee so we can discuss it on the floor and then vote on the floor. But I think it's a very controversial issue right at the moment. Not the poverty, not the difficulty our folks are having in terms of living and working, but I'm talking about in terms of this time with the economy.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Shimada.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was actually not going to comment because I think for those of you who know me very well, you know, people would consider me a reliable advocate for those most vulnerable in our society, and those include our working poor. But I did want to underscore the issue of the living wage. And that is, in the same way that in our Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, we have been addressing the issues of elder poverty and what does it really require for someone to just live a basic existence in our society, whether they're working or not working. And I see the parallels, that lowest paid workers in our society will become the people who are continuing to potentially live in poverty until their older years, and will continue to access social services perhaps at a higher rate than if they were able to earn a basic living wage throughout their most productive period of time in their lives. So the question was raised, is this the right time? We talk a lot about minimum wage. We don't talk about maximum wage in our society. And we do have the widest gap in the poverty gap, or the income gap is the widest that it has been. We need to do something about that as well, and begin to talk about capping executive salaries and exorbitant bonuses that are paid out because people have highly trained and well-paid attorneys to negotiate those kinds of contracts at the highest levels of our public and private industry. So with that, I do want to say thank you for bringing this bill forward. It is a difficult time for small business and for our agricultural industry as well, but let's move forward with this bill, and let's hope for better economic times for us all, especially when we've just created 95,000, I believe, new jobs in this state was the latest report. So it's not all doom and gloom. Thank you.
All right. We'd call a roll.
Swanson?
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morell? Morell, no. Alejo?
Aye.
Alejo, aye. Allen?
Aye.
Allen, aye. Furtani?
Aye.
Furtani, aye. Gurel? Yamada? Aye. Yamada, aye.
Okay. The bill's out.
Thank you very much.
On to appropriations.
All right.
And you have one more bill.
All right, members, this is on AB 243. Again, thank you for your time, and we're passing out some copies of some pay stubs that we'll be explaining in just a bit. Members, California has over 64,000 farms that grow about 250 different crops, including fruits and vegetables, on roughly 9 million acres throughout our state. In order to harvest those crops, more than 600,000 farm workers are needed so these crops can be consumed and reach our dinner tables every day. Most of these workers are supplied to farmers by farm labor contractors licensed by the state, who are not required to disclose who they supply workers to on their pay stubs. This information is critical in instances where there are problems in the workplace, such as a failure to pay wages due, where other entities besides the contractor have shared liability under state law. In a recent survey of over 1,000 Central Valley farm workers, it was found that 70% of those workers could not identify the name of the farm where they were working on. Clearly, this is a significant impediment to evaluating whether other entities also have legal liability under existing law that would operate to make farm workers whole. Assembly Bill 243, as amended, simply requires a farm worker's weekly wage statement to list the grower or other farm contractor to whom the worker has furnished, was furnished during the pay period. The amendment, if approved by the committee today, states clearly that listing of the legal entity on the wage statement does not create liability on the part of the legal entity. We have distributed to the committee copies of the pay stubs provided by some farm labor contractors who already provide this very information that we're discussing here today, and they've done it on a volunteer basis. This example suggests that it is technically feasible to provide the information to farm workers. And I have with me today Mr. Mark Shaw, the Deputy Director of California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, sponsors of AB 243, to testify in support of this bill.
Mr. Chairman and members, Mark Shaw, California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. A number of members and staff have raised questions about the liability issue, and so I thought I would take my brief time here to address those. For those of you that don't know, this is the third time that this bill has been before this committee. in those three times, Legislative Council has analyzed the bill, and in the Leg Council's digest on each of those bills, including this one, it's not indicated that the bill creates additional liability for growers. Similarly, 6 committees and floor units of both houses have analyzed this bill. Actually, it would be 7, including the committee analysis before you today. None of those have indicated that there's any additional liability created by the mere listing of the farmer's name or other entity on the worker's pay stub. The purpose of this bill has never been to create additional liability for growers. The purpose of this bill has been to give transparency to who stands behind the contractor if something goes wrong in the workplace, as Mr. Alejo has mentioned, such as failure to pay wages. The California legislature has enacted 2 statutes in the last decade that provide liability for growers for their farm labor contractors' illegal conduct. But those statutes are virtually meaningless if you can't evaluate who the other potential liable party is because you can't determine who they are. And let me just briefly touch on what those statutes are. Labor Code Section 1695.7 creates strict liability for all labor violations by a labor contractor if the grower knowingly hires an unlicensed contractor. So liability for everything. Workers' comp, pesticides, field sanitation, failure to pay wages, record-keeping violations, everything. Labor Code Section 2810 applies to 5 industries in the underground economy, one of which is agriculture, which basically says that it's a violation of California law to knowingly enter into an illegally underfunded labor contract. An illegally underfunded labor contract is defined in statute as providing insufficient funds for the contractor to comply with applicable law. The remedies under that statute are all actual damages. So in a case where a farm worker worked under an illegally underfunded contract and the labor contractor did not pay wages, the farm worker could sue the grower for those wages.
Okay, we're going to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, the reality in the fields is that unless there are packing boxes with the grower's name on it, or there's a field supervisor wearing a uniform with the grower's name on it, the work being performed on these 9 million acres is basically invisible. And the other liable parties are basically hiding in plain sight. And it makes it impossible to utilize the statutes that California has passed to vindicate workers' important rights, so we'd ask you to support the bill.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Witness support.
Mr. Chairman, I got Caitlin Vega, legislative advocate with the Labor Federation, here to testify in support as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
She
Chair.
may testify.
We are here in strong support of this bill. Mr. Furutani was just talking about the underground economy, and we know that in hard economic times, the underground economy grows because workers are desperate to hold on to their jobs and are more willing to put up with abuses because they simply don't have other options. To us, this bill is all about the underground economy. This bill is about protecting responsible employers. This bill is about ensuring that when workers' rights are violated, they are actually able to go after those who are already liable under existing law. And this serves as a deterrent because this legislature has passed the laws that Mr. Schock spoke about specifically because there is such a high rate of wage theft and labor law violations in these industries, and it's essential that we give workers this tiny bit of information that empowers them to get justice when their rights are violated. Thank you.
Okay. Other witnesses in support.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lee Sandall with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. This legislation will bring a little dignity to these workers' lives by providing them with a complete employment record. And this employment information, and I've worked in the longshore industry myself for 50 years. I started on those docks in 1962. And on my wage stubs, and I worked out of the hiring hall, so somewhere in a 7-day week, I may have 2 or 3 or 4 different employers. And with that wage stub came this information that we're asking for these workers. Thank you.
Well, my grandfather was a longshoreman. He worked on the dock, so I know exactly what you're talking about. He took care of us pretty good. Thank you. Any witnesses in support?
I just wanted to express our support on behalf of United Food and Commercial Workers and also on behalf of the California Teamsters Public Affairs Council.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support?
Oh, I'm sorry, Marcy Berman.
Okay. Witnesses in opposition? Here we go. Yes, sir.
Davi Rodriguez from Save Our State once again. I applaud the effort to address the underground economy. What I don't understand is why are we only limiting it to farm workers? Again, we have done the research on the amount of under-the-table labor that goes on out there at these day labor centers, and it's the most untalked about subject when we talk about the underground economy. I don't know how much money is lost every single day. The state does not collect, they're not taking in money for unemployment insurance, workers' comp, all that kind of stuff. But we're worried about farm workers. There's 600,000 farm workers, as he says. We have done the research. We know that there's 58,000 to 100,000 under-the-table day laborers out there that are being hired every day by slimeball business people. I don't know why we...
All right, we got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's enough. Thank you. Yes, in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation. We're, of course, here in opposition to AB 243. I don't think that would come as a surprise to you. We've opposed legislation like this in the past, and we continue to oppose it for the reasons that we've opposed in the past. I just found the proponent's testimony a few minutes ago interesting in that, on the one hand, with the legislation as amended, they say that this new requirement to provide the information about the grower who's employing the farm labor contractor is not intended in and of itself to impose any additional liability on the party identified by that information. I think that raises the question, then why do it? Why make that? Why have that requirement? And then the proponents go on to conflict themselves and say, and talk about all the different statutes already enacted under California law that would, in fact, help to impose additional liability on agricultural employers. So, at the end of the day, if the purpose of this bill is to provide additional sunshine on the relationship between a farm labor contractor's employees, and whoever it is that the farm labor contractor is hired by, I think the relevant question is, to what purpose? There's already ample disclosure available for farm labor contractors and who they hire. They're required to be licensed by the state. They're required to be registered with the federal government. Farm labor contractors are required to have surety bonds to ensure the payment of wages to their workers, and the state administers a farm worker recompense fund for the purpose of making sure that workers are paid wages they're owed in the event that something goes wrong. Farm labor contractor goes out of business, something else happens. So to wrap all that up, and to not take too much of your time, we remain opposed to this bill for the reasons that we've been opposed to similar legislation in the past, and would respectfully request a no vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In opposition?
Guadalupe Sandoval, California Farm Labor Contractor Association. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Not a former longshoreman, but a former farm worker. And I've worked for farmers. I've worked for farm labor contractors. I understand there are problems out there that existed 40 years ago when I worked, and they probably still exist today. Farm labor contractors are, as Brian alluded to, highly regulated. They're licensed. The association I belong to, we support that when there's bad players out there that don't follow the rules, that they should be punished. Unfortunately, I don't think that you should punish everybody for the acts of a few out there when there are ways to recompense and to make them whole. I'm surprised by a piece of legislation that's sponsored by a group that would benefit through the Private Attorney General's Act for any kind of lawsuits they would be filing against employers for failure to pay. Furthermore, I believe that we underestimate what the cost to these employers is going to be. This is, as we've heard in the prior discussion, a pretty difficult economy for a lot of employers and for a lot of workers out there. There are agricultural employers who are going south as a result of the overregulation, as a result of the difficult economic burdens on them to operate in California. With NAFTA, it's not that hard for a grower to have operations south of the border. We need to protect these jobs. We need to figure out ways to make agriculture stronger, not weaker in California. I do also question some of the data that's been presented as far as the basis for some of these regulations. I don't know who those 1,000 workers were that were interviewed in this survey and who conducted that scientific survey. But I have a feeling if there was a more widespread, neutral survey conducted of farm workers, you'd find that the vast majority of farm workers are properly paid and compensated for the work that they provide. I think that you would find that it's not 70-80% of the workers that work for growers. It's closer to about 30 or 35% based on state and federal audits of payroll records. Given this information, we strongly oppose this additional burden on farm labor contractors.
All right. We're going to ask the other witnesses in opposition to give their name and organization.
Jennifer Barrera with California Chamber of Commerce, also in opposition.
Thank you very much.
Dave Puleo, Western Growers Association, in opposition.
Thank you.
Tricia Garinger with Agricultural Council of California, in opposition.
Thank you very much. Any questions by members of the committee? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Morrell, did you have a question?
Mr. Alejo, I noticed that on this bill, as well as last bill, a lot of these people that support your bill are union workers, and in the opposition tend to be business owners that actually have a vested interest in business trying to control their own fate. Can you help me reconcile this, if you would?
Well, just to point out one of the concerns, which was whether this was going to create any liability. I don't see how you can make it even more abundantly clear by reading the amendment, which says shall not create any liability on the part of the legal entity. So the amendment addresses and makes very clear no liability. It's basically providing these farm workers, these hard people that we praise. Tomorrow is Cesar Chavez Day. We're going to be honoring farm workers throughout the state. As we're here sitting here, there's workers out there toiling the fields, and to say that they are not even entitled to that most basic of information about what farm they're working on in a very simple way on their pay stub, and it's very reasonable, very easy to do and accomplish. I don't see the major obstacle that this would by providing this to the workers that we like to praise here in the state capitol.
Okay. Any other questions by members? Is there a motion?
The bill, please.
The bill's been moved. Mr. Furutani, second by Mr. Yamada. I think it's just a basic right information people know. I mean, it seems pretty fundamental and pretty amazing that it's not already happening. So with that, we can call the roll.
Motion is due pass as amended to approve. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morrell.
No.
Morrell, no. Alejo.
Aye.
Alejo, aye. Allen.
Aye.
Allen, aye. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Gurel. Yamada.
Aye.
Yamada, aye. That bill is out.
Okay, I'm going to turn the chair over to Mr. Morrell. So this should be interesting.
You're all heart. Which one are we on?
File item number 2, AB 59.
AB 59, if you'll come forward and surprise us.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am presenting AB 59, the family leave bill. This is an unpaid leave bill. AB 59 will vastly improve the ability of family members to care for their loved ones in need. The bill would add seriously ill grandparents, grandchildren, parents-in-law, and siblings to the list of family members that are employees can take protective leave to care for them under California Family Rights Act. This is unpaid leave. It would also ensure that employees can take leave to care for their seriously ill independent children. At least 19 states have family leave laws that are more generous than federal law, and 8 states use a more expansive definition of family members. I think most Californians would be shocked to discover that if, for example, they had a sister who was dying of an illness, the law would not protect their right to take a leave to care for him or her. California family leave laws should reflect the reality of today's family dynamic. 16% of all California households include at least one person providing care to someone over the age of 50, and about half of these caregivers are in the workforce. California also has the second highest percentage of multi-generational households in the country. Almost half of Californians are single and their closest relative may be a sibling. In addition, AB 59 clarifies that employees have the same rights under the state unpaid leave law to care for a seriously ill domestic partner as they do to care for a seriously ill spouse. California should be at the forefront of ensuring that our family and medical leave laws accomplish the purpose for which they were intended. It is grossly unjust to force employees to choose between keeping their job and taking care of a family member. This bill does not lengthen unpaid leave at all. It simply expands the list of family members that employees can take care of and provide protective leave to care under the California Family Rights Act. And with the recession and with returning veterans, we're finding families are becoming closer and sharing households, and that's why I asked for this bill to be moved forward. And I'd like for my witnesses to self-introduce. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Turman, and I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center. We are a nonprofit, public interest legal organization that advocates for the employment rights of low-wage workers and their families. I'm honored to be here today to express our support for AB 59, and I'd like to thank Assemblymember Swanson for his leadership on this important issue. The Legal Aid Society runs a work and family helpline where we hear from callers across the state of California every day with questions about their rights under the family and medical leave laws. We hear from many callers who need family leave to care for a sibling, a grandparent, a grandchild, parent-in-law, and even adult children, and we have to tell them that the law does not recognize those close relationships. We recently heard from Rachel Diaz, whose sister Laura was diagnosed with colon cancer, stage 4 colon cancer, last year. Laura is widowed, and Rachel was the only person that could take care of her. She's the only person that Laura wanted to take care of her. She was the designated health care agent for her and the primary caregiver, yet she was unable to take the family leave she needed to be there for Laura. She prepared written testimony for the committee explaining what the lack of access to family leave meant to her and her sister during this difficult time. It meant missed opportunities to provide the quality of care Laura needed. For example, rushing Laura to the hospital at 2 a.m. because of fever or infection and having to leave her at the hospital at 6 a.m. to prepare for work. Rachel said, "I did the best I could before and after work, as well as weekends. I would spend the night at the hospital or at Laura's and then get ready for work there. The worst part was going to work, pretending I was not distracted or suffering. I had to be strong in front of Laura, then in front of my coworkers, and finally my immediate and extended family members. I found time to cry as I drove from one place to another." Like Rachel, many workers are the only caregiver available to an ailing sibling, grandchild, grandparent, adult child, or parent-in-law. Yet even when their loved one is diagnosed with a life-threatening condition, they cannot take family leave to be with them. Many of our callers tell us they can't take necessary unpaid leave because to do so would mean risking their jobs and their family's well-being. Just yesterday, we heard on our helpline from a woman who lost her job of many years when she needed to take time off to go to Peru to take care of her brother who had cancer. He had been diagnosed with cancer. She lost her job. We heard from a woman whose employer would not let her take leave to care for her brother who had a severe heart attack, even though she was the only person available to care for him. He was single, their parents were gone, there were no children, she was there, and she couldn't take the leave she needed to care for him. Another call came from a woman who was denied time off to care for a grandmother in the final days of her life. While, again, we hear from employees in these impossible predicaments, there's little assistance we can provide because existing law does not recognize these relationships. AB 59 would help alleviate the struggles of these workers and would only have a modest impact on large employers. Again, this is an unpaid leave law. It only applies to workers who work for companies with at least 50 employees. It only applies to workers who've been at their employer for 1 year and who've had a certain number of hours. we don't think that the impact would be significant on business, but it's very meaningful for those families who need this leave. No one should have to make such impossible choices between caring for a loved one and their job. For these reasons, we urge your support for AB 59. Thank you.
Yep.
Those interested in support of the bill?
Charlotte Newhart with the American Association of University Women California in strong support.
Mariko Yoshihara with the California Employment Lawyers Association in strong support.
Elena Perez with the California National Organization for Women in strong support.
Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation in strong support.
Brandy Davis with the Labor Project for Working Families, also in strong support.
Randy Cheek with SEIU Local 1000, always happy to support one of the chairman's bills.
Teresa Rentgen with the Alzheimer's Association in support.
Beth McGovern with the California Commission on the Status of Women in strong support.
Lee Sandall with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union in support.
Marcy Berman with the California Teamster Political Affairs Council, United Food and Commercial Workers in strong support.
Okay, those witnesses in opposition, please come forward.
Good afternoon, members. Jennifer Barrera with the California Chamber of Commerce, and we do oppose AB 59, not because we're not sympathetic to the situations that were raised here, but because not every sympathetic situation needs to actually be codified in a statute, and it actually separates the good employers from the bad ones who can accommodate those types of situations. And just because this wouldn't be a paid leave doesn't mean it comes at no cost to employers. It actually comes at a significant cost. Right now, the California Family Rights Act and the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, which the California Family Rights Act is modeled after, basically run together. They're concurrent. So if you're going to trigger a leave under the California Family Rights Act, you generally trigger a leave under the Federal Act too. And the two 12-week periods run together. If AB 59 were to go into effect, that would no longer happen. There would be a and significant disconnect between the two leave laws. So if you took time off under AB 59 for the California Family Rights Act to go care for a grandparent, a parent-in-law, something along those lines, it wouldn't trigger the federal one. So an employee could take 12 weeks of leave under the California Family Rights Act, return to work the next day, and then take another 12 weeks of leave under the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, because it wouldn't run concurrently any longer. Then we would be exposing employers to not just 12 weeks leave of absence, but rather 24 weeks of protected leave of absence where the employer cannot deny the leave because it's a guaranteed right. They can't without facing litigation, of course, and they have to remain or keep the job open and protected for that employee to return. That's a 6-month leave of absence that employers are required to hold open a job for. And this isn't counting all the other numerous leave of absences that we have here only in California. So it's a significant burden and cost to employers if this were to pass. Now, they raised points that, the dynamic of the family unit has changed, and we understand that, but our law already accounts for that. We have it in our law that if you stand in the shoes of the parent, meaning you're doing the day-to-day taking care of the individual, you're providing financial support, etc., you already qualify as an individual under this law. So we do account for the fact that the family dynamic is not the same. Another point that I wanted to make is, bringing up the other point, how good employers from bad. We have very stringent wage and hour laws, such as the alternative work week schedules. Perhaps if we lighten those wage and hour laws a little bit, it would provide employers with more flexibility to grant these leaves of absences. And for these reasons and more, we oppose AB 59 and request a no vote on this issue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. Julianne Broyles here on behalf of the California Employment Law Council, as well as the California Association of Joint Powers Authorities. We are here to talk about our concerns with AB 59. Certainly, we agree with the points raised by Ms. Barrera for the California Chamber and would like to associate ourselves with that, but we have some additional points to make as well. When asked, California human resources managers think that managing leave requirements here in California is probably one of the most demanding and difficult tasks that they do in their day-to-day management of HR. California, as Ms. Barrera pointed out, has multiple laws on top of the California Medical Leave Act. But along with California Family Rights Act, we have to administer, as she said, the Federal Medical Family Leave Act, as well as a Bone Marrow and Blood Donation Leave Act, Pregnancy Disability Leave Act, mandated jury duty leave, leave for domestic violence purposes, and all of these can take employees out of the workforce and require other workers to cover for them while they're out on this protected leave. It's not a paid leave, but it is a protected leave in most cases. And that doesn't count the other leave programs that employers voluntarily offer as a benefit to their employees. Their sick leave programs, their long-term disability programs, and leave for bereavement purposes. All of these add to the headaches of an HR manager. We're already struggling. As was noted in prior testimony and by some of the committee members, California's economy is a fragile thing right now. One tip, one way or the other, could really start the economy to head back down rather than the few glimmers of hope that we've seen in recent weeks. And we think that this is the wrong time to put something like this further, to make California what is called an asterisk state in most HR managers' minds. California is an asterisk state because it has requirements such as this one that are only in California or except in California. And it makes our jobs that much harder for our companies to survive and operate. For this reason, we're asking you not to pass this bill forward at this time, to think about the economy as it stands today and not add more burdens to managing our businesses than we have already taken on. Ask for no vote.
Cynthia Leon with the California Manufacturers and Technology Association. We're also here in opposition of AB 59. We have major concerns about the impact this will have on expanded leave for our workers when we need flexibility in these times, and also the cost to replace the workers, especially if we are adding them to the current FMLA rules.
Kara Bush with the California Grocers Association. We're in opposition for the reasons previously stated. Thank you. Megan Loper on behalf of the California Hospital Association, also in opposition.
John Hanley, California Independent Grocers Association, also in opposition.
Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation, also in opposition.
Any additional questions from our committee?
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Mr. Swanson, in the testimony from the person from the California Chamber about the problem with the connected leaves, unlike it was before, can that be resolved? Because I think the essence of the bill is the expanded situation relative to family, and I fully support that. But I could see the problem if that is butted up against the other leave. It could be very difficult.
Well, first of all, if a person had to take unpaid leave for 6 months, I imagine they're doing it because it's a very serious illness in their family, and they're going to have to afford to do that. I mean, it's unpaid leave, and so I think that situation would speak for itself. To the family member. I mean, they're making a choice of going without income for 6 months, and they're probably doing it for very serious reasons.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but in terms of the mandated protection that the leave guarantees in terms of the employee and then the responsibility of the employer, can this bill be fixed so it's just like it is now, except we expand the categories? And then you're right, the family member has to make that decision, but it won't be at having...
Well, I'll take a look at it.
Oh, I appreciate that.
I'll take a look at it.
What's his name?
Any other?
I'll move the bill.
Oh, hold on. May I have one more question?
Sure.
You're the chair.
You're the chair.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions, Mike?
Yeah, I was just trying to get an answer from the consultant regarding this whole issue that was brought up about. I mean, with what Mr. Furutani is saying, I'm very supportive of expanding the situations for individuals and family members, because there's so many different situations where you need that family support. But what I don't want to do is that inadvertently end up doubling a paid leave if that's the effect of the bill. And so I was just trying to get an answer.
Yeah.
Was it an unpaid?
This is unpaid.
Unpaid leave. Okay.
Unpaid protected leave, not paid leave.
Okay, thank you.
You know,
but we will look at it. I'm sorry. Did you want to add something?
Well, I mean, in terms of resolving the difference, I don't know that there's a way that, without amending federal law, that you could say that this leave for a category who's not covered under FMLA would qualify for both purposes. So without an amendment to the federal law, because I think there's a provision of the regulation that addresses that issue. So it would be a new category that wasn't technically subject to the FMLA for the unpaid leave.
Mr. Swanson, I wondered if you have any statistics. Some of the things that I've studied is a lot of companies vary on their profit margins. The larger the companies have smaller profit margins. I'm understanding grocery stores is 1.5% to 3% for profit margins, and 10 to 15% is a good margin for other companies because of overhead. Do you have any statistics to show how much that will drop in these companies' profits?
No, unpaid leave, I do not. No.
Wouldn't that be a good thing to have before we jump on this?
I just don't have any statistics. We will look at it. I don't know if you have any comment.
I do, yeah. There was a survey of employers covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is has the same eligibility requirements as the California Family Rights Act. And it found that 90% of covered employers reported that this law either had a positive or neutral effect on profitability and growth. Most of the cost savings to employers came from decreased employee turnover. And if I may just comment on the double leave issue, that is, with all due respect, a bit of a red herring, I believe, because if the CFRA, the California Family Rights Act, were amended to add siblings and grandparents, the person wouldn't automatically be entitled to then engage in another 12-week leave under federal law unless they had a very serious illness themselves, or if another family member who's covered by federal law became seriously ill. So there has to be a qualifying reason under the federal act in order for a second leave to be initiated.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment? Julie Broyles again here on behalf of CAJOP and CELC. As the proponent noted, there still can be stackable leave. She did not disagree with the fact that you can stack the leaves. If you've already used up your leave for yourself, my serious illness or my child's illness or my parent's illness, I've used up my CFRA leave. I then come back in and say my brother has terminal cancer. I now am eligible for the federal leave, so it doesn't resolve that issue. Another point I would like to point out in the survey that she is citing, she is talking about employees with the California paid benefit that comes from EDD, which is a different program. I just looked at the report, so I do understand that that's what the report actually covers. She's applying information on a different program to this particular bill and would like to respectfully disagree with that point.
Okay, any last comments as we wind this down?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Swanson, thank you very much for bringing this bill forward. Again, I am focusing on the bill in chief, which merely seeks to amend existing law to expand upon the definition of who may be eligible and for this type of unpaid leave in our state. Again, reinforcing the fact that we have a lot of older adults and that need to be cared for, and the fact that we do not have a lot of alternatives out there with the kind of reductions that we're seeing. Frankly, folks who are not taken care of sometimes end up in higher and more costlier institutional settings, and that kind of cost shift also has an impact upon the overall state of our economy. So I'm happy. I believe the bill was moved and seconded, or not seconded yet?
Not seconded.
Well, I'm happy to second the bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll close it if all the questions have been asked. Mr. Chairman, I'll close. Was there another question?
Mr. Swanson, I thank you for bringing this forward. I'm just trying to understand this before we vote on it. I mean, this whole thing about whether it's a red herring or not regarding stacking, I'm still a little bit concerned about that. And then aren't there other leaves that we utilize where medical care premiums have to be paid during the time that people are off?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand this to make sure that we're really looking at this seriously, because I really appreciate what Assemblymember Swanson's trying to do, but I want to make sure we understand it before we vote on it.
Sure. I'm sorry, go ahead.
To that, yeah. So,
Jeff, it's okay with the chair.
So the Federal Family Medical Leave Act covers, like California law, parents, children, and spouses. And it's true that when California law goes above and beyond federal law, an employer cannot count that leave against your federal entitlement. For example, in California, we recognize domestic partnerships. And so it's already the case that in California, because we recognize domestic partnerships, an employee is permitted to take time off to care for a seriously ill domestic partner. That time does not count against the Federal Family Medical Leave Act because federal law doesn't recognize that. So that's the issue. This would merely be adding a couple other family relationships to California's definition of family member, and unless federal law is amended to cover those same relationships, an employer cannot count the leave against the federal entitlement.
Thank you.
One last question, Mr. Swanson. I know you didn't have any statistics on the profit margins, but have you guys forecasted how much this will actually cost businesses in the state of California?
I'm not.
Don't you think that might be a good thing to do?
Well, I really don't, and I'll explain in my close why.
Explain in your close. I'm curious to know.
Thank you. Because I think that this is really not a financial consideration for the employees and the employer. I think that this is whether or not workers in our state will have the opportunity in the midst of a severe family crisis to be able to take care of a family member. Now, each bill, the federal law and the state law, requires a certain amount of very specific documentation. So there's no way to just take time off work. I mean, this is a serious problem. In our law, it says it has to be defined as a serious health condition and illness, injury, impairment, or physical or mental condition that involves either the patient care or continued treatment or continued supervision. Now, I've sponsored this bill Mr. Chairman, I've sponsored this bill a couple of times, and I've sponsored it before my own family has been exposed to these kind of situations. So this year, my sister was ill with breast cancer. She's in Los Angeles. She was in Los Angeles. Father, 82 years old. He was trying to care for her, but couldn't go anywhere else. And my brother, who was in Los Angeles, couldn't help. These are very practical situations for families. Now, unfortunately, my sister has passed. But that shouldn't be the only relief for a family member's ability to also try to deal with these emergencies. So I respectfully disagree that this is a financial question. I believe this question of leave has to do with the way we respect workers, the right for them not to be pitted between their job and their family. That's what this is about, and I would ask you for your aye vote.
Call the roll. Call the roll.
Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Morel.
No.
Morel, no. Alejo. Aye. Alejo, aye. Allen.
Aye.
Allen, aye. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Morel. Yamada. Aye. Yamada, aye.
Thank you.
Bill on call.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
We have the final bill on call, AB 217, Carter. That's
Okay, we have one bill on call, AB 217 Carter. Can we call the absent members?
AB 217, Carter. Allen. Aye. Allen, aye. Furutani. Aye. Furutani, aye.
Okay, that bill is out. We're going to conclude the hearing. In the future, we were very nice in the first hearing, so we didn't turn the clock on. but we're going to turn the clock on in the future, and we're going to always be courteous to everyone. I appreciate very much the testimony that we received today on all these issues, and I think that people passionately believe in these things, and I appreciate that people take the time to testify. Thank you very much. Meetings